I remember the first time I stepped into the forest at night. The fog was thick, curling around the trees like pale fingers, and every step I took made the earth sigh beneath me. Somewhere far off, a light flickered, struggling against the darkness, and I swore I could hear a low hum, like the echo of someone breathing just beyond sight. The silence pressed in, heavy and familiar, and yet there was something in that quiet that felt wrong. I paused, letting the cold seep into my bones, and in that moment, the shadows seemed to move of their own accord. Branches rustled though the air was still, and every time I thought I saw a glimpse of someone or something, it vanished before I could blink. I told myself it was just my imagination, but then I heard the soft tapping on the window of the cabin ahead, a rhythm too deliberate to be wind. That's when I saw it. Fog clung to the ground that night, low and patient, like it had been waiting. It was late autumn, the kind where the cold doesn't bite yet. It just watches. Tall pines line the trail, their trunks dark with damp, rising so high they erase the stars. I walked alone, boots brushing wet needles, breath leaving me in pale clouds that drifted and vanished. The path was old, barely remembered. The earth dipped where others once walked, though no one had come this way in a long time. Fog curled around my ankles, then my knees. It moved slow like it was thinking. Somewhere between the trees, something whispered. Not loud, not sharp, just enough to notice. My name wasn't spoken, but the tone was familiar. Too familiar. It sounded like me. The whisper slid to the fog and brushed the backs of my ears, warm and cold at the same time. I stopped walking. The forest did not. Branches creaked softly overhead. Needles rustled without wind. The fog kept drifting, even when I held my breath. I told myself it was memory, echo, the mind playing games in the dark. Then it happened again, closer this time. The same voice, the same rhythm I use when I think alone. My skin tightened. A thin chill ran up my spine, slow and deliberate. Moonlight flickered through the canopy, not steady. It pulsed as clouds slid past unseen. With every flicker, the shadows changed. They stretched too far, then snapped back. Tree trunks bent where they shouldn't. My own shadow lagged behind me. Just for a moment, before catching up, I kept walking, because stopping felt worse. Each step pressed damp earth into my soles. The air smelled like rot and pine sap. Cold slid through my jacket seams, gentle but insistent. That was when I saw the light. Far ahead, soft, warm, a lantern glow, pale and steady, hovering low between the trees. It didn't swing, didn't flicker. It simply existed. Relief loosened something in my chest. Not comfort, just direction. I followed it. The trail narrowed, roots twisted underfoot. The fog thickened, swallowing my legs, my knees, my sense of distance. The lantern never grew closer, no matter how long I walked. It stayed just out of reach, always the same size, always waiting. Whispers follow me now, not constant, not clear, fragments of breath, half-thoughts, my voice, again and again, drifting from different places, behind me, beside me, once from directly above. I didn't look up. The trees leaned inward as I passed. Their needles brushed my sleeves. Cold resin stuck to my skin. Moonlight blinked and the shadows surged. For a heartbeat, something stood where the light should have been. Tall, wrong. Then the lantern was there again, unchanged. My chest felt tight. Breathing took effort. Each inhale tasted damp and old. I reached out. My fingers cut through fog first. Thick, cold, almost heavy. Then the air changed. The chill hit all at once. Not like cold weather. Like a hand placed inside my bones. It ran straight up my arm. Across my shoulders. Down my spine. I gasped though no sound came out. The lantern flickered. Just once. The whispers stopped. Silence pressed in from every direction. No rustling. No creaking. Even my breath felt too loud. The forest held still. I stood there, arm outstretched, fingers numb, fog curling around my wrist like it belonged there. The path beneath me felt softer, less solid, as if it might give way if I leaned too hard. I pulled my hand back slowly. The chill stayed. The lantern dimmed, not fading, just withdrawing, like it was being taken somewhere else. I didn't chase it. Around me, the pines loomed endless and patient. Their shadows settled into shapes that didn't need moonlight anymore. The whispers didn't return, but I knew they hadn't gone far. I stood alone on that forgotten trail, fog breathing around me, the forest watching without eyes. And for the first time that night, I understood something clearly. The path was not meant to end. It was meant to keep me walking. And somewhere in the quiet, my own voice waited to speak again. The cabin appeared without warning. One moment, there was only fog and trees. The next, pale with rose in the mist, close enough that I could smell old pine and damp rot. Night pressed in from all sides. The forest stood still, as if it had leaned closer to listen. A thin light leaked from the cabin's seams. Not bright, just enough to notice. It slipped through the cracks around the door, between warped planks, like the cabin was holding something warm inside. I stood at the edge of the clearing. Cold crept up through my boots. My breath fogged, slow and shallow. The door faced me. It was closed. I was sure of that. Still, something felt wrong. The shape of it shifted when I blinked. Not much, just enough to make my eyes ache. The wood looked swollen, then thin, like it was breathing. I took a step closer. The ground felt packed down, as if many feet had stood there before me. The air thickened, heavy on my tongue. Each breath felt borrowed. The door handle was iron, dark, cold looking even from a distance. I raised my hand. The cabin creaked softly, a low sound deep in the walls, slow and steady. I knocked once. The sound didn't echo the way it should have. It sank into the wood, dull and swallowed. I waited. Nothing answered, but the silence felt crowded. I knocked again. This time, something answered back. Not a voice, not words. A sound from inside the cabin, slow and rhythmic. Thump, pause, thump. My heartbeat, perfectly matched. The air around me tightened. My chest felt hollow, like something had reached in and pressed gently. I stepped back. The light inside the cabin flickered. Not like a flame, like a pulse. The door looked different again. The grain of the wood had shifted. Lines curved where they hadn't before. The surface seemed softer. I stared too long. That was when the scratching began. Slow, deliberate, not frantic, not angry, just patient. Something dragged along the inside of the door, from low to high. A single line, then another. The sound vibrated through the wood and into my bones. My fingers tingled numb and cold. I didn't move. The scratching stopped. Silence fell so thick it felt wet. The forest held its breath. Even the fog seemed to pause. I became aware of my own breathing. Too loud, too fast. I tried to slow it. The door creaked again. Not opening, not closing, just shifting its weight. The handle twitched, just slightly. A cold regret settled in my stomach, heavy and quiet. The kind that comes when you realize you should have turned back long ago. I leaned in without meaning to. The wood smelled old and damp, layered with something faintly sweet beneath it. The light leaking through the cracks brushed my boots, pale and trembling. I raised my hand toward the handle. Before I touched it, the scratching returned. This time, closer to where my hand hovered, right behind the wood. Slow, careful, as if something on the other side knew exactly where I was standing. I froze. My breath caught in my throat. The air felt thick, pressing against my ears. Then nothing. No scratching. No heartbeat. Only silence. The door looked normal again. Just old wood. Just a cabin. But the light inside dimmed, withdrawing deeper into the cracks. I stepped back, one careful step at a time. The ground felt uneven, unsteady beneath me. The forest didn't move, didn't follow. The cabin remained where it was, quiet and waiting, the door perfectly still. I stood there longer than I should have, listening, wondering. Eventually, the cold pushed me away. As I turned, I felt it, not a touch, not a sound. Expectation. Like the cabin knew I would be back. The fog was thicker than before. It lay low across the forest floor, heavy and unmoving, swallowing the ground until my feet felt unreal beneath me. Cold soaked through my boots. The damp crept upward, slow and patient. The trees stood farther apart here, or closer. It was hard to tell. Their shapes blurred at the edges, trunks fading into gray, branches dissolving into nothing. The air smelled wet and metallic, like rain that never quite fell. I took a step. The fog shifted. Not drifting, not rolling, parting. It opened just enough for me to move through, then closed behind me again, sealing the path like it had never been there. Something moved to my left. I turned. Nothing remained but fog and shadow, tangled together. I kept walking. Each step felt measured, deliberate, as though the ground expected me to follow a certain pace. My breath came out slow, visible, and vanished too quickly. That was when I noticed it. A shape ahead of me. Not solid, not clear, just darker than the fog around it. It moved when I moved, stopped when I stopped. I slowed. So, did it. My chest tightened, a dull pressure building beneath my ribs. The forest felt closer now, leaning inward without sound. I raised my hand. The shadow raised its hand too. Not a reflection. Too slow, too thoughtful. The fog muffled everything. No birds, no insects, not even the soft rustle of leaves. Only my footsteps. And another set perfectly matched. I turned quickly. The fog rushed in, filling the space where I expected something to stand. My heart thudded once, hard and lonely. I told myself it was distance playing tricks. Light bending wrong. Fear stretching shadows into shapes. But when I faced forward again, the shadow was closer. Its edges sharpened for just a moment. It stood where I had been standing seconds before. Cold crept up my spine. My shoulders tightened, muscles pulling inward like they wanted to disappear. I walked faster. The fog thickened in response, pressing against my knees, my waist, my chest. Each breath felt heavier, the air damp and thin. The forest floor dipped. Roots rose like knuckles beneath the mist. Then I felt it. A hum. Low. Steady. It didn't come from ahead or behind. It rose from the ground itself, vibrating through the soles of my feet. The sound settled into my bones, into my teeth, into the soft space behind my eyes. I stopped walking. The hum did not. It deepened slightly, slow and constant, like a breath drawn by something too large to see. The shadow moved again. Closer now. I could sense it behind me, without turning. A presence pressing lightly against my back, just beyond reach. My skin prickled. Cold spread across my shoulders, down my arms, pooling in my hands. I wanted to look. I didn't. The hum grew stronger, filling the fog, the trees, my chest. It made my heartbeat feel wrong, out of sync. I took one step forward. The shadow matched it perfectly. Another step. Another. The forest seemed to stretch. Trees repeating themselves in the haze, trunks bending at familiar angles. I had the sudden sense that I had already walked this path, that I would walk it again. The fog brushed my face now, cool and damp, clinging to my eyelashes. Every breath tasted old. The hum softened, then shifted. For a brief moment, it sounded like breathing. Not mine. I stopped. The shadow stopped. Silence crept in around the hum, thick and expectant. I turned my head just enough to glimpse movement at the edge of my vision. A shoulder, an outline. Gone the moment I tried to focus. My stomach knotted, tight and hollow at the same time. Fear settled in quietly without panic. The kind that doesn't rush. The kind that waits. I took a slow breath. The fog exhaled with me. The hum faded, sinking back into the earth, leaving a hollow ache behind it. The forest seemed to relax, though nothing moved. When I finally turned, there was nothing there. No shadow, no shape, just fog, thick and endless, stretching between the trees. But the feeling stayed. That awareness, that certainty. Something had followed me, learned my steps, listened to my breath. And even as I walked on, alone in the mist, I knew it hadn't gone far. It was simply waiting for me to forget it was there. The candle burned low on the small table. Its flame bent slightly, though the air inside the cabin was still. No draft, no movement. Night pressed against the walls, heavy and quiet. The forest outside had gone silent in a way that felt deliberate. I sat alone on a narrow chair, shoulders hunched, a book resting open in my hands. I wasn't reading anymore. My eyes traced the same line again and again without meaning. The cabin smelled of old wood and wax, dry dust, something faintly sour beneath it. The only light came from the candle. It painted the room in soft gold, leaving the corners dark and uncertain. Shadows clung there, unwilling to move. I shifted slightly. The chair creaked, sharp in the quiet. I froze, listening. Nothing followed. Outside, leaves rustled once. Not wind, just a brief reminder that the forest still existed. Then silence folded back in. I turned the page. The paper whispered under my fingers, loud as breath in my ears. My skin prickled. That was when I felt it. Not a sound, not a movement, a presence. The air near the window felt different, colder, heavier. I lifted my eyes slowly. The window sat across the room, a single square of black glass set into the wall. No reflection, no stars, just darkness. I stared at it longer than I meant to. The candle flickered. For a moment, I thought it was just my reflection shifting. The pale oval of my face, stretched thin by glass. Then something pressed forward. A face. Pale. Too pale. It flattened against the window from the outside. Skin smooth and colorless like wax left too long in the cold. No breath fogged the glass. No sound came with it. Its eyes were open, unblinking. They stared directly at me. I couldn't tell if it had features, or if my mind was trying to give shape to something that didn't want one. The mouth was there, thin, closed, expressionless. My chest tightened. Breathing became something I had to remember how to do. The candle trembled, flames shrinking low, throwing long shadows that climbed the walls and reached toward the window. I didn't move, didn't blink. The face remained, pressed close enough that I could see faint cracks in the glass around it, spidering outward as if under gentle pressure. Cold slid across my skin, starting at my neck and spreading down my arms. My fingers numbed where they rested on the page. Then I blinked, just once. The window was empty. No face, no mark. Only my own reflection stared back at me. Pale, wide-eyed, candlelight flickering across my features. The forest beyond the glass was still, dark and unreadable. I swallowed. The sound felt too loud in my throat. I waited for my heartbeat to slow. It didn't. The candle steadied, flame standing upright again. The room felt smaller now, the walls closer, listening. I stood slowly, legs stiff, the floor cold beneath my feet. Each step toward the window felt measured, careful. The wood creaked softly under my weight. I stopped a few feet away. The glass was clear, cold. I could see my breath fog it faintly as I exhaled. No sign of anyone outside. No movement between the trees. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had been there, close enough to feel the warmth of the candle through the glass. My reflection stared back, steady now, almost calm, too calm. I stepped back. The chair scraped softly behind me. The book slipped from my fingers, landing open on the floor with a dull sound. I didn't pick it up. I returned to the chair and sat, keeping my eyes on the window. The candle burned lower, wax pooling thick around its base. Minutes passed, or seconds. Time felt thin here. Outside, the forest remained silent. Inside, the cabin breathed softly, with settling, walls whispering faintly as they cooled. Fear coiled in my stomach, slow and patient. But beneath it, something else stirred. Curiosity, the kind that doesn't feel safe. The kind that asks questions without expecting answers. I didn't look away from the window again, even when my eyes burned, even when the candle threatened to go out, because some part of me was certain of one thing. If I stopped watching, if I blinked again, something might press against the glass once more. And this time, it might not disappear. The lantern appeared just beyond the tree lean. Pale light swinging softly, though there was no hand to carry it. Fog curled around the base of the trees, brushing my ankles as I stepped forward. The forest smelled damp, resin-rich, faintly metallic. I followed, slowly, every step sinking slightly into wet earth, each breath heavy with mist. The lantern moved too, drifting just ahead, as if waiting for me. I thought I could hear it hum, faint and rhythmic, though no wires or wind stirred it. Shadows stretched from every tree, long and crooked, bending in ways that didn't make sense. Branches brushed my shoulders. I flinched. The fog seemed thicker here, curling higher, clinging to my arms. It muffled everything except the faint swish of my own steps. I reached the edge of the trees. The lantern halted abruptly, hovering, silent, almost expectant. I peered closer. Behind it, shapes moved too fast to identify. Flickers of my peripheral vision, tall, thin, moving against the grain of the fog. Each one gone an instant, I tried to focus. The air shifted. A soft, cold breath brushed the back of my neck. I didn't dare look behind me. The lantern swung gently again, just enough to cast trembling light on the twisted trunks. The fog swallowed half of it. The other half glowed like a pale heartbeat. I stepped closer. The forest responded, leaning in, branches stretching like fingers. The smell of damp earth mixed with something faintly sweet, almost like smoke. I could hear something moving in the distance. Not footsteps, not rustling leaves, just soft motion, measured, patient. The lantern drifted again, leading me deeper, where the trees were closer together, knotted and leaning over each other. I brushed against bark, rough and cold, sticky with sap and mist. Shadows twisted unnaturally with every flicker of the light. It stopped again, waiting, silent. The forest held still, tense, as if watching me hesitate. I tried to peer behind the lantern. Nothing remained in the fog. No shape, no face, just the soft haze rolling over roots and moss. A shiver ran down my spine. I realized I had stopped breathing without noticing. The fog pressing on my chest, slow, suffocating. The lantern didn't move again. I didn't move either. We stood in quiet, eyes and light meeting. Then a sound came, not behind, not in front, all around, rustling too soft to locate, yet deliberate, a whisper of motion, threading between the trees. The forest seemed alive in the way the fog shifted, curling toward the noise, stretching in anticipation. I swallowed, tasting the dampness in my throat. The lantern flickered. I blinked. When my eyes reopened, it was still, too still, waiting. And I knew, somehow, that I wasn't alone. Something watched from just beyond the light. Something patient, unseen, letting me follow, letting me step deeper. The lantern pulsed faintly again, drifting a few feet forward. It didn't swing. It didn't sway. It simply waited. And I walked, through twisted trees and curling fog, through shadows that bent just slightly wrong, through a forest that seemed to breathe softly with every step I took. The shapes behind the lantern never fully appeared. They lingered just beyond vision, quick as memory, impossible to hold. But I felt them, always, following, watching, just beyond the light. And the lantern, pale and patient, guided me further, as if it knew I would keep walking, until the forest decided it was time to stop. The house sat quiet. Empty, I told myself. But the floorboards whispered beneath my boots, tired and brittle. Cold air drifted in from cracked windows, carrying the faint smell of dust and decay. I reached the base of the attic stairs. What groaned under my weight, soft, slow, deliberate, footsteps answered me from above. Not fast, not panicked, measured, matching the rhythm of my own heartbeat. I froze. The sound stopped. Only silence remained. The shadows along the walls seemed to stretch, curling toward me, crawling without legs. Each flicker of moonlight turned the corners into shapes I couldn't name. I climbed, one creaking step at a time. My fingers brushed the railing, smooth in some places, rough in others. Every scrape felt like it might echo in the house forever. The attic door came into view, dark, low, waiting. The footsteps stopped completely, not behind me, Not above, only a thick, pressing quiet. The kind that makes your ears ring, your skin itch, your stomach tighten. I reached the door. Cold met my fingertips immediately, though it felt alive somehow, pulsing faintly under my touch. Silence stretched, too heavy to move through. I pulled the handle slowly. Nothing. The steps didn't return. No breath. No shift in the shadows. I pressed my ear to the door. The attic beyond was still, yet I knew it wasn't empty. Couldn't be. Shadows on the walls danced differently now, reflecting movements I didn't make. My own reflection seemed off, stretched and bending where it shouldn't. A faint scent drifted from above. Musty wood, old wool, something faintly metallic that I couldn't place. I reached for the knob again. The chill ran straight through my palm. Sharp, clean, a warning. I didn't open the door. Couldn't. The silence itself felt like regret, heavy and waiting. I stepped back. The house exhaled softly around me. Floorboard settling. Shadows curling back into the corners. The night pressing closer. I stayed there listening. Heart thudding. Breath shallow. Knowing the attic held its secrets just beyond reach. And I walked away slowly. Footsteps echoing in the empty house. Fading only when the door shut softly behind me. The memory of those steps, slow and deliberate, lingered, and I knew in the quiet that some things move even when no one is watching. The cabin was still, air unmoving, thick with the scent of old wood and candle wax. Outside, the forest pressed close, dark and patient. Branches whispered against each other, though the wind did not stir. A window fogged over from inside, not cold, not damp, just misted, as if breathing had drawn it there. I approached slowly, each step measured, feet brushing dust from floorboards. The candlelight flickered, throwing soft shadows across the wall. Words appeared on the glass, written by no hand I could see, letters curling faintly in the condensation, delicate and deliberate. I reached for them, fingers brushing the cold surface. A chill raced up my arm, settling deep in my chest. The letters vanished the instant I looked away. I blinked. The window was empty again. Only my own reflection stared back, pale and wide-eyed. Outside, the forest seemed closer, leaning in, patient and silent. I could almost hear it breathing through the glass. I stepped back. The candle trembled, flame dancing along the walls. Shadows twisted unnaturally, stretching toward the corners, shrinking when I blinked. The air grew heavier, thick with expectation. Every breath felt loud. Every heartbeat echoed, sharper than before. I moved closer again. The glass fogged once more, almost immediately. Another word formed. Then another, each vanishing before I could fully focus. I traced the edges with my fingertips. The chill dug deeper into my bones. It wasn't just cold. It was the weight of being watched. I held my hand to the window. The fog shifted beneath my fingers. A faint shape seemed to ripple behind it, quick and fleeting. The forest outside remained quiet. Too quiet. Every rustle I thought I heard was swallowed before it reached me. The candle flickered again, flame steadying, shadows retreating slightly. I took a shallow breath. The letters were gone. The glass clear once more. And yet I felt it, the subtle pressure of eyes on my back. The forest leaning in, waiting. I didn't turn. I didn't need to. The window had told me enough. Something beyond it was aware, patient, watching every movement. I stepped away slowly, feet dragging lightly over floorboards. The candle flame flickered one last time. The letters vanished, but the forest did not release its hold. Its presence lingered in the air, quiet, subtle, and I knew the moment I turned away. The cabin had already leaned back to listen, even through the glass, even in the stillness. The hum began softly, so faint I thought it was my own breathing at first. A low vibration that settled in my chest and stayed there. Night wrapped the forest in a dull gray haze. Fog clung to the roots of the trees, thick and unmoving. Every step I took stirred it just enough to remind me I was still here. The hum drifted between the trunks, not carried by wind, not echoing, steady, patient. I followed it. The forest felt different now. Not quiet, attentive. Branches leaned closer together, their needles brushing my sleeves, leaving cold traces on my skin. The hum grew clearer. It rose and fell slowly, like something alive beneath the ground. Each vibration pressed gently against my ribs, syncing with my heartbeat. I walked slower. The fog responded, curling higher, wrapping around my calves, my knees. It smelled damp and old, layered with moss and rot. The trees began to change. Their trunks twisted at odd angles. Bark peeled back in thin strips, revealing pale wood beneath. Roots coiled above the ground, snaking toward the sound. The hum pulsed. With every pulse, the forest seemed to react. Branches quivered. Leaves trembled without wind. I stopped. The hum did not. It continued, steady and unbroken, filling the space around me. Not loud, just impossible to ignore. My breath fogged in front of my face. Cold seeped through my jacket, settling deep in my shoulders. I took another step. The ground felt softer here, springy, like it might give way if I pressed too hard. Shadows shifted at the edges of my vision, too quick to see clearly. They twisted with the rhythm of the hum, stretching and shrinking in time. I turned my head. Nothing stood there, only fog and tree trunks, repeating endlessly. The hum deepened slightly. It moved through my chest now, through my throat. I felt it in my teeth, in the back of my skull. My stomach tightened. A quiet unease settled in, heavy and unmoving. I kept walking. The forest floor sloped downward. Roots brushed against my boots. Something cold and damp slid across my ankle before disappearing back into fog. I flinched but didn't stop. The hum grew louder. Not sharper, closer. I realized then that it wasn't coming from ahead. It was everywhere. Above me, below me, inside the trees. The branches overhead swayed slightly, though the air remained still. Their movement matched the rhythm perfectly. The fog thickened again, brushing my hands, my chest. Each breath felt heavier, slower. I reached a small clearing. The trees pulled back just enough to form a loose circle. The ground at the center was bare, dark soil exposed and damp. The hum vibrated strongest there. I stood at the edge. My skin prickled. Cold pooled at the base of my spine. Shadows lingered just beyond the trees. Tall, indistinct. They shifted when I shifted my weight. Paused when I held still. The hum softened for a moment, then changed. For just a second, it sounded like voices layered together. Not words, not whispers. Breath, slow, measured. I swallowed. The sound settled back into its steady vibration, leaving my chest tight and hollow. I stepped into the clearing. The ground dipped slightly beneath my weight. Damp earth pressed through the soles of my boots. The hum surged. It pressed against me from all sides, filling my ears, my lungs. My heartbeat felt wrong, too fast, then too slow. I felt very small, very alone. The fog rolled inward, closing the space behind me. The trees leaned closer, their branches forming a loose canopy overhead. I turned slowly. The shadows had moved. They stood closer now, just beyond the tree line, still shapeless, still watching. I couldn't see faces, couldn't see limbs, but I could feel their attention settle on me, heavy and patient. The hum eased slightly, dropping into my chest again where it stayed. I realized then that I would never find its source. It wasn't something to reach or touch. It was something to carry. The forest exhaled softly. Leaves shivered. The fog thinned just enough to let me breathe. I stepped backward, then another step. The hum remained, quieter now, but steady. A constant presence beneath my thoughts. The shadows did not follow. They stayed where they were, just beyond the light, just beyond clarity. I turned and walked away. The forest slowly returned to its stillness. Branches settled. Roots sank back into the earth. But the hum lingered. It followed me between the trees, through the fog, into my breath, even when I stopped walking, even when the forest fell silent again. The vibration remained deep in my chest. A reminder, some sounds don't fade. They wait. The mirror sat against the far wall. Tall, narrow, its frame worn smooth, corners softened by time. The cabin was quiet again. Too quiet. The fire had burned low, leaving only a dull glow that barely reached the edges of the room. Cold pressing through the logs, slipping through cracks like breath. I hadn't noticed the mirror fog at first. It happened slowly. So gently it felt intentional. A thin layer of mist crept across the glass from the center outward, softening my reflection until it blurred and faded. No warmth in the room. No steam. Just fog. I stood still. The floor beneath my feet felt colder than before. The air smelled faintly metallic, mixed with old wood and ash. My reflection moved. Not wrong. Not yet. I raised my hand. The shape in the mirror followed. A fraction of a second late. Just enough to notice. Just enough to make my stomach tighten. I lowered my hand. The reflection hesitated. Then followed. I told myself it was the fog. The firelight. My eyes tired from too much dark. The mist thickened, swirling faintly as if stirred from behind the glass. I stepped closer. Cold radiated from the mirror in slow waves. It brushed my face, my chest, my reflection sharpened again, features coming into focus. My eyes looked the same. Too steady, too calm. I blinked. The reflection did not. A small smile crept across its face. Not wide, not sharp, just enough to notice. My breath caught. My mouth stayed still. My lips did not move. But the reflection's smile deepened slightly, soft and knowing. Panic rose quietly, like water filling a room. Not rushing, not loud. I stepped back. The reflection did not. It remained close to the glass, face filling the mirror, eyes fixed on me with an expression that felt patient. The fog pulsed once, gently. The cabin creaked. Would settling or shifting. I swallowed. My throat felt dry, tight. Each breath scraped faintly on the way in. The reflection tilted its head. I did not. A cold pressure settled behind my eyes. My hands trembled at my sides, fingers numb. I tried to look away. The mirror pulled at my attention, heavy and insistent, like a weight behind my eyes. The reflection's smile faded. Its lips parted slightly. No sound came out. The fog thickened again, crawling up the glass like breath drawn by unseen lungs. The edges of the mirror darkened, closing in. I squeezed my eyes shut, just for a second. When I opened them, the mirror was still fogged. My reflection stood straight again, neutral, expressionless. Relief washed through me, thin and unconvincing. I let out a slow breath. The glass cleared slightly near the bottom, enough to see movement. My reflection shifted its weight. I had not moved. My heart thudded once. Hard. The reflection raised its hand. Slowly, carefully. Its fingers pressed against the inside of the glass, leaving faint trails in the fog. I backed away until my shoulders brushed the opposite wall. The cold air felt sharper, biting through fabric. The cabin felt smaller now. Walls closer, ceiling lower. The reflection leaned forward. Its breath fogged the glass from the inside. I could see the shape of it now, the subtle expansion of chest, the soft cloud forming and fading. Something whispered, not from the mirror, from everywhere. Low, unclear, too familiar. I pressed my palms into the wall behind me, grounding myself in the rough wood, the splinters, the sting. The reflection stopped smiling altogether. Its eyes darkened, deepening into something hollow. Then it blinked. Once. I didn't. The fog drained suddenly from the mirror, sliding downward like melting frost. The glass cleared completely. I stepped forward to spite myself. The reflection matched me now. Perfectly. Same posture. Same breath. No smile. Just me. I leaned closer. So did it. Our foreheads nearly touched through the glass. Cold seeped into my skin, deep and aching. I could see tiny cracks in the mirror now. Hairline fractures spidering from the edges, catching the firelight. The reflection's lips moved. Barely. No sound reached me. But I understood, not with words. With feeling. The cabin creaked again, louder this time, like a slow exhale. The fire popped softly. I stepped back. The reflection remained still, watching, waiting. I turned away. The mirror fogged instantly behind me, thick and complete, swallowing whatever stood on the other side. I didn't look again. I sat near the fire, pulling my knees close, arms wrapped tight around myself. The warmth felt distant, unreliable. The whispering faded. The cabin settled. But the feeling stayed, that I had been seen, measured, and even now with my back to the mirror, I could feel behind me, smiling when I wasn't. The fire burned low, small, careful. Its light barely reached beyond the circle of stones, fading quickly into the trees. The forest waited just outside that glow, dark and unmoving. I sat close to the heat, knees drawn in, hands stretched toward the flames. The warmth touched my skin, but didn't sink in. Cold still lived deeper, settled in my bones. Night smelled sharp here. Burnt wood, damp leaves, something old beneath it all. The fire crackled softly. Each pop felt loud in the quiet. Beyond the light, something rustled. Not wind, too deliberate. Leaves shifted where no breeze moved. Branches brushed against each other, slow and careful. I leaned forward slightly. The shadows reacted. They pulled back, then leaned in again, stretching toward the firelight but never crossing it. Tall shapes flickered between the trees. Incomplete, unfinished. I couldn't see them clearly. Only movement. Only absence. The fire snapped. A spark lifted, then died midair. The rustling stopped. Silence pressed down hard enough to make my ears ring. My breath felt too loud in my chest. I held still, then movement again. Closer this time. Something shifted just beyond the glow. Close enough that the firelight almost touched it. Almost. I smelled damp bark, cold earth, a faint breath that was not mine. My shoulders tightened. The forest felt nearer now, as if the trees themselves had leaned forward, closing the space inch by inch. The fire shrank. Not quickly, just enough to notice. The shadows stretched longer in response, reaching farther with every flicker. One of them bent where it shouldn't have. I swallowed. Another rustle. Lower. Heavier. Whatever stood there moved slowly, carefully avoiding the light, testing the edge of it. I shifted my weight. The movement stopped instantly. I didn't dare look too hard. Didn't want to give it shape. The fire crackled again, weak and uneven. Its warmth faltered. Behind the shadows, more movement stirred. Not one presence. Several. They didn't step forward. They waited. The forest seemed to breathe as one, slow and patient. Branches creaked faintly, matching the rhythm. My chest felt tight. Breathing took effort. I stared into the flames, pretending the darkness wasn't watching me back. A branch snapped somewhere to my right. Close. Too close. The fire dipped, then flared weakly, throwing the shapes into brief, broken clarity. Tall. Wrong. Gone the moment the light settled. The rustling ease, retreating slightly, but feeling remained thick, pressing, aware. I sat frozen until my legs numbed, until the fire burned down to glowing embers. Only then did the forest finally still. But even in the quiet, I knew the truth. The light hadn't scared them away. It had only taught them where I was. The cabin sat empty. Or at least, that's what I told myself. The air smelled of old pine and dust, faintly acrid, like smoke long since gone. My boots pressed against the wooden floor, toes catching on worn planks. Everything was in place. Cups on the table. A broom leaning in the corner. A chair pulled slightly from the wall, as if someone had just left. But the silence was wrong. Thick, heavy. It pressed against my ears, filling the spaces between each heartbeat. I stepped inside slowly. The door creaked under my hand, soft and deliberate. The hinges moaned, not loudly, but enough to feel watched. Footsteps echoed behind me, low, measured, matching my pace. I turned. No one. The cabin was empty. I moved forward, each step careful, deliberate. The floorboards whispered. My own breathing felt loud, intrusive. Shadows hugged corners. Dark shapes waiting patiently. They didn't reach for me. They didn't move, not fully. Something shifted behind the curtain. A shadow. Gone the moment I focused on it. I paused. The air tasted thick, metallic, damp. The silence deepened. My pulse thundered in my ears. Every creak of the cabin walls sounded amplified, like whispers echoing in a well. I reached the center of the room. Every object seemed unchanged. Yet, I knew it had been touched, moved, watched. The footsteps returned, soft, then vanished. I held my breath. The forest outside pressed closer. The fog settled at the windows, heavy and expectant. I wanted to leave, to run, but the door seemed farther away than when I entered. The walls closed in silently, patient, deliberate. I waited. Minutes passed, or hours. Time stretched thin, warped by the weight of nothing. Then, a floorboard creaked behind me. Slow, like a promise. I didn't turn. The cabin exhaled, settled back into its quiet. I knew, as I finally moved toward the door, that some spaces were not empty. They were patient, waiting for footsteps to return. And even when I stepped outside, the silence clung to me, heavy and unbroken. The hallway stretched long and narrow. Lights flickered overhead, soft and uneven, casting shadows that bent in ways the walls shouldn't allow. The air smelled faintly of old wood and something metallic, just under the surface. Every breath felt heavy, like it carried its own weight. I walked slowly, careful, footsteps soft against the worn floor. The house seemed to lean closer, listening. Shadows stretched along the walls. They didn't move naturally. They twisted, curling in corners, collapsing then expanding when the light changed. A whisper brushed my ear, faint, unclear, stopping when I strained to hear it fully. I held my breath. The hallway hummed softly, almost imperceptibly. The lights flickered again. One bulb dimmed to near darkness before flaring briefly. Something moved just beyond the shadows. I couldn't see it clearly, only the sense of presence. Patient, waiting. I stepped forward. The air grew colder. Every breath tasted damp. A chill slid down my neck, slow and deliberate. The whisper returned, soft, so close it could have been my own thoughts spoken aloud. I swallowed, throat tight. The lights flared again, and for a fraction of a second, I thought I saw a shape move along the wall. Tall, uncertain, then gone. The hallway felt longer, walls pressing inward slightly, subtly. Shadows deepened in response to my steps. I paused, listened. The silence that followed was heavier than the whispering. A sudden chill promised a presence unseen, not malevolent, not angry, just aware, measuring. I continued forward, every movement slow, deliberate. The floor creaked underfoot, loud in the quiet. Lights flickered, shadows bending around them like smoke. I reached the far end. Nothing waited. No shape, no face. Only the faint hum in the walls, soft, almost like breath. The hallway exhaled with me, settling back into itself. I stepped back outside the room, heart still racing. The shadows followed, just at the edge of vision, patient and quiet. I knew I hadn't seen the last of them. The hallway waited. Lights would flicker again. Shadows would bend. And the soft, impossible whispers would return. Every step I took, the forest seemed to close in. The trees repeated themselves endlessly. Branches arched overhead, forming shapes I had already passed, though I could not remember when. Fog hugged the ground, curling around my boots, wet and patient. I glanced behind me. The same trees appeared, again and again, roots twisted into familiar knots. Leaves whispered softly, though no wind moved them. I walked faster. The forest mirrored me. Every turn, every hesitation, reflected in the path behind me. Silence pressed in, thick, so heavy it made my ears ring. Even my breathing sounded loud. Shadows stretched between the trunks. They lingered where light should have been, not moving quickly, just waiting. I thought I heard footsteps echo my own, soft, measured, falling exactly where mine had. Though no one was there, the fog thickened at my knees. Cold seeped through my clothes, settling deep in my skin. I felt it crawl along my spine, a shiver I could not shake. The path twisted again. Or maybe it hadn't. The forest blurred time and direction. One tree seemed to bend just for me, marking a trail that might not exist. I stopped, listened. The forest exhaled. A low hum pressed beneath my ribs. Branches shivered slightly, as if testing my attention. I walked on, step by careful step. The feeling of being followed grew stronger, though nothing appeared in sight. Shapes flickered at the edge of my vision, tall and dark, moving just beyond recognition. Every time I turned, they vanished. The air grew colder. Frost threatened my fingers and face, though the season was not yet winter. The ground beneath me felt softer, almost breathing beneath my weight. I realized then that the forest wasn't just behind me. It was everywhere, encircling me, learning my pace, my rhythm, watching from unseen eyes. I swallowed, every nerve alert. Every shadow seemed to stretch a little closer, waiting for me to stumble. I forced another step forward. The trail stretched endlessly. Branches swayed gently, almost like arms reaching but stopping short. I kept walking. The echo of my own footsteps sounded louder with each repetition. Every rustle of leaves reminded me I was not alone, even if I could not see what followed. The forest that followed was patient. It did not rush. It did not speak. It simply waited. I woke to the quiet of the cabin. The air smelled faintly of wax and old wood. Cold seeped in through the cracks, brushing my skin like a slow exhale. The fire had died overnight, leaving only the faintest glow in the hearth. That's when I saw it. A handprint on the wall. Pale, too pale, smudged at the edges, as if pressed and lifted too quickly. I stepped closer, fingers hovering above the mark. Cold radiated from it, sharpened the chill in the room. It felt alive. I leaned in. The wall smelled faintly of sweat and damp, though no one else had been near. The handprint hadn't been there yesterday. I was certain. I touched the edge lightly. Nothing moved beneath my fingers, but a shiver ran through me, slow and deliberate. By morning, the handprint had moved slightly. Not far, a fraction of an inch. Closer to where I slept. I recoiled. The air in the cabin had grown heavier overnight. Breathing felt sticky, thick, like the room itself was pressing against me. Each day it shifted again. Slow, patient, following me without noise. I tried not to look, tried to ignore it. But even from the corner of my eye, the wall drew my attention. Shadows seemed to linger there, darker than the rest of the room. They curled around the handprint, small but deliberate, like guardians or watchers. The chill pressed deeper into my chest with every glance. Cold settled along my spine, wrapping around my shoulders, threading down my arms. The forest outside remained quiet, the trees unmoving. Yet the cabin felt alive in contrast, walls watching, waiting. I felt small in the room, tiny, as though the space had contracted to measure me. Every time I moved, the handprint seemed to inch closer, just a little, subtle, slow enough that I almost convinced myself it was imagination. But I knew better. The air thickened around me, breath shallow, each heartbeat loud in my ears. My own presence echoed off the walls. The pale hand waited, patient, silent. I stepped back. The shadows shifted slightly in response. The wall felt colder, heavier, pressing its presence into me. I wanted to leave, but something held me. Curiosity or fear, I couldn't tell. I stared at the handprint longer than I should have. Its subtle movement haunted me, a quiet reminder that I was never truly alone. And in that stillness, I realized it wasn't just a mark. It was watching, learning, waiting for me to notice again. The radio sat on the counter, old, wooden, buttons worn smooth by time. I had left it unplugged, yet it hummed now, low and persistent. Static whispered to the speakers. Faint at first, then louder like the hum of distant machinery. I leaned closer. The cabin smelled of dust and burnt wood. Cold air brushed my neck, carrying something faintly metallic, sharp. Between bursts of static, I heard it. A whisper, calling my name. Soft, familiar, wrong. I reached for the radio, fingers trembling. But the sound didn't stop. It grew clearer, layering over the static. A voice I knew, but not entirely. I tried to turn it off, twist the dial, unplug it. Nothing worked. The whisper became a soft chant. Repetition, slow and deliberate. Faint pauses, like breaths in time with mine. I stepped back, heart racing. Cold settled in my shoulders. A prickling along my spine, crawling into my scalp. The radio's static pulse, growing louder, vibrating to the counter, into the floor. My boots tingled where they touched the wood. The voice called again, patient, deliberate, almost watching me struggle. I pressed my hands to my ears. It didn't stop. The static filled every corner of the cabin. Familiar, intimate, wrong. The cabin seemed smaller suddenly, walls leaning closer, shadows curling where the firelight didn't reach. I dared a glance. Nothing moved, nothing alive. The voice grew faintly urgent. I could swear it tried to reach me, even without words. A presence threaded through the hum, patient and aware. I tried to leave, turned to step away, but the sound followed, softly, inescapable. I exhaled slowly. The static hissed in response, like the radio had learned my breath. My heartbeat matched its pulse. Even when I turned, even when I stepped across the cabin, it remained, static and whisper, the voice and the hum. I realize then that some things don't stop. Even if the world goes silent, even if the cabin is empty, it waits, listening. Fog lay heavy across the forest floor. It rolled between the trees, thick and unyielding, curling around my boots and ankles. The damp smelled of wet earth, moss, and something faintly metallic, old and patient. Every step I took echoed softly. Or maybe it wasn't my step. Footsteps followed behind me, soft, measured, perfectly matching mine. I stopped. The steps stopped. I turned quickly. Nothing, only the fog, curling and still. I moved forward again. So did they. The air grew colder. Damp clung to my jacket, chilling me to the bone. Breath hung thick in the mist, rising and falling in rhythm with my heartbeat. The forest felt alive, silent but aware. Branches swayed gently, though the air was still. I glanced behind again. Still nothing. And yet, I could feel eyes on my back. Watching, waiting. I forced my legs to move faster. The footsteps behind me quickened in response. Perfectly in sync. I want to call out, but my voice caught in my throat. Shadows shifted within the fog. Tall, fleeting shapes that disappeared whenever I tried to focus. The ground beneath me felt uneven, almost breathing beneath each step. The footsteps grew louder, yet still unseen, each echo pressing heavier against my chest. A sudden shiver crawled down my spine. The fog pressed closer. Fingers of mist winding around my arms, my neck, my shoulders. I stopped, held my breath. The echo of footsteps paused. I dared to glance over my shoulder. Nothing. Cold seeped into my legs. Heart pounding, chest tight. Every nerve screamed at me to move. The fog thickened, swallowing the path ahead. Every direction looked the same. Every tree identical. Time and space repeating endlessly. I forced myself to take another step. The footsteps answered. Closed now, but still unseen. A soft whisper of movement slid through the mist. Branches brushing against each other. Leaves rustling faintly, just beyond sight. The fog seemed to anticipate my next step. Pressing in, patient, unyielding. I realized then I would never outrun it. The footsteps would follow. Every step I took, every breath I drew, the forest had learned my rhythm, and it would not forget. I walked on, step by careful step, the mist curling around me like a slow, living thing, and somewhere behind it, the footsteps never faltered. A hollow sound resonated through the trees, low and empty. It matched the rhythm of my own breathing at first, then diverged. Soft, deliberate, impossible to locate. I froze. The air smelled damp, heavy with decay and moss. Cold brushed my skin, crawling along my neck and arms. The sound pulsed again. Not wind, not rustling leaves. Something alive in the hollowness. I moved forward slowly. The sound moved with me, not behind, not ahead, beside me, everywhere. Shadows twisted along the trees, shapes too fleeting to name. They mirrored my pace perfectly. Stop when I stopped. My chest tightened. The sound pressed into my bones. A low vibration under my ribs, threading into my teeth and skull. I whispered to myself. No response. Only the hollow echo continued, rising and falling like someone breathing through the earth itself. I tried to turn. The sound mimicked me. Pause when I paused. Stop when I stopped. I realized then that I was not alone, not visible, not tangible, but undeniably present. The hollow pulsed again. A vibration I could feel in my fingertips when I brushed against a tree. A presence moving with deliberate care. Fog curled along the ground. It pressed against my legs. Shadows reached from the trees, long and patient, bending as the sound pulsed. I took another step. The sound followed, closer now, pressing into my chest. I stopped. It stopped. I breathed. It echoed my inhale. The forest held its breath with me, waiting that I forced myself to move again. Step by slow step, the hollow sound shadowed me perfectly, relentless, patient. And I knew, in that quiet terror, I would never be alone again. The cabin sat quiet, almost too quiet. Air thick with the scent of old wood and faint smoke. Cold seeped in through cracks, brushing my skin with invisible fingers. I stepped inside. The door closed softly behind me, not with a slam, not with wind, but like an inhaling breath, deep and deliberate. The walls creaked, slow, soft movements, like the cabin itself was alive. Each sound echoed faintly, then paused, leaving only the weight of silence. Shadows stretched along the corners. They didn't move independently. They shifted as the light from the fireplace bent across the room, long and subtle. A faint brush of movement passed behind me. Slow, deliberate, patient. I turned. Nothing. The air pressed closer, heavy and expectant. Cold ran down my spine, threading through my shoulders. Every footstep echoed faintly, swallowed almost instantly by the thick silence. The cabin seemed to breathe, walls flexing, expanding, then contracting softly around me. The floor beneath my boots shifted imperceptibly, like it was alive as a shadow passed across the far wall. Slow, measured, stopping whenever I met it with my eyes. I realized I had not entered the cabin. It had invited me. The scent of damp wood and wax intensified. Every surface seemed aware of my presence. My own movements echoed like whispers. I leaned against the wall. Cold pressed against my back. The shadows reacted subtly, stretching, curling, adjusting to me. I stepped forward. The floor groaned beneath me. A door closed softly in the distance, though I hadn't touched it. I paused, listening. No wind, no forest, only the subtle inhale and exhale of the cabin itself. Patient, watching. I wanted to leave. I wanted to run. But something held me there. A calm unease, a subtle fear. The firelight flickered. Shadows bent. The cabin exhaled again. I stayed still, waiting, not for anything, not for anyone, but because the cabin had decided it was time. Time to observe. Time to let its presence settle around me. I felt small, and for the first time, I understood that some places are alive, and some of them do not forget. Figures moved just beyond the firelight, not fully visible, not solid, only glimpses, shadowy shapes that flickered in the corner of my vision. The forest pressed in closer. Branches arched overhead, scratching softly against each other. The air smelled damp, earthy, layered with moss and decay. Every time I turned my head, the shapes vanished. Not gone, just hiding, patient and deliberate. I stepped closer to the fire. The light reached farther, but they didn't retreat. They stayed just beyond the glow, aware of me, measuring. The fire crackled softly. Its warmth barely reached my skin. Cold seeped up from the ground, winding around my ankles, climbing my legs. Leaves rustled, soft, deliberate, matching a rhythm I couldn't name. I froze. The shapes paused too, not moving, but present, I whispered. No response. Only the faint shiver of motion through the fog. The forest seemed alive. Every rustle and sigh threaded through the trees, pulsing around me. I tried to step closer again. They shifted. Slow. Patient. Just enough to remind me they were there. I held still, heart hammering. The forest watching. Shapes hovering just beyond sight. Minutes passed. Or maybe hours. Time stretched thin in the quiet. The figures did not leave. They simply waited. Silent, patient, unseen. And I knew they would not disappear. Not while I remained in the light. The fire dimmed slightly. Shadows grew. The forest leaned closer. And the figures rustled softly, just beyond reach, observing everything I did. Candlelight flickered across the cabin walls. Shadows danced softly, stretching long then shrinking abruptly. The air smelled faintly of wax and dry wood. Cold drifted in through the cracks in the logs. I glimpsed it first at the edge of my vision. A pale face, flickering, half hidden in shadow. I turned quickly. Gone. Only darkness remained. The candlelight reflected softly on the wall, unbroken. I blinked. It appeared again. Faint. Wrong. Eyes fixed on me. Unblinking. A chill crawled up my spine. Slow. Deliberate. Settling in my shoulders. I moved closer to flame. The face wavered, twisting slightly with each flicker of the candle. I held my breath. The shadows shifted unnaturally, stretching toward the window, away from flame. The face disappeared entirely. For a moment, the room was empty, silent, breathless. Then, in the reflection on the glass, I saw it again, eyes wide, expressionless, watching. I didn't move, didn't blink. The candle trembled softly, but stayed lit. I realized then that the face wasn't moving away from me. It was moving with me. Patient, following. Cold seeped into my chest. The room felt smaller, closer, alive in its quiet observation. I turned, slowly. The shadow on the wall twisted in response. The face flickered once more, then vanished into nothing. Yet the unease remained. The forest outside felt closer. The cabin walls breathed quietly. And I knew the face had not left. It lingered, waiting, just beyond sight. A single breath fogged the cabin window. The air inside was still. The candle burned low, barely reaching the corners of the room. The forest pressed close outside, silent and patient. The foggy mark shaped slowly into a small circle. Then, behind it, fleeting shapes appeared. Soft, silent, impossible to hold in sight. I leaned closer. Cold pressed along my fingers as I touched the glass. The fog drifted beneath my touch. Nothing moved. Nothing spoke. And yet the sense of being watched pressed against me. I stepped back. The room felt smaller. The forest leaned in closer. Branches tapped faintly against the walls. The fog thickened again. One fleeting shape lingered just beyond the mark. A shadow, thin and patient. I held my breath. It didn't vanish. It simply waited. The candle flickered. The fog settled. The window reflected my wide eyes back at me. I knew I had been seen, even through the glass. Even though no hand had written my presence, the breath remained, a quiet reminder, a whisper of the forest pressing close. I turned slowly. The shapes vanished. The forest exhaled softly. But the memory of the watchful presence stayed. A lantern drifted through the fog. No hand held it. No wind carried it. It moved deliberately, patient, almost breathing with a mist. I followed. The forest around me thickened, curling with the lantern's movement. Branches brushed my arms and face, cold and damp. The lantern floated steadily, then paused, waiting. Shadows moved behind it, too quick to identify, too fleeting to name. I stepped closer. It vanished into the fog. Soft laughter echoed in its wake. High, delicate, unseen. The forest shifted around me, watching, patient, silent. I reached out toward the lantern. Cold mist wrapped my hands. Nothing met my touch. The lantern reappeared ahead, moving slowly, unclaimed, leading me deeper, where the trees grew closer together. I realized that the forest itself was alive, observing my steps, learning, patient. The lantern drifted, pale and insistent. I followed, every step slow, careful, and I understood quietly that I was not walking alone. Something moved with me, just beyond the fog, just beyond the light. I saw it along the cabin wall. Dark, tall, moving slowly, deliberate. I stared. It stopped, just beyond recognition. Patient, I moved closer. The shadows shifted, mocking me, stretching unnaturally, bending in ways the walls shouldn't allow. The air grew colder. The floorboards whispered beneath my boots. The candle flickered, casting light that didn't reach the corners where the shadow lingered. I stepped back. It moved again. Careful, measuring. I realized I could not escape it. Not in the cabin. Not in the light. The shadow mirrored my hesitation, pausing when I paused, resuming when I moved. I tried to focus, to define it, but it eluded me, a presence rather than a form. The room grew smaller. The walls leaned inward. Every breath echoed faintly. Every heartbeat seemed too loud. The shadow continued its slow patrol, waiting, watching, unseen yet undeniable. I stood still, let it move, counting each flicker of the candle, feeling its awareness press into the quiet. And I knew it would not leave. Not tonight. Not ever. The forest fell into complete silence. No wind. No rustle. No life stirring. Every nerve was alert. Every sound, imagined or real, screamed in my ears. Breaths sounded loud. Heartbeats echoed. I stopped walking. Time seemed to stretch. Every shadow loomed larger than before. The fog pressed closer. Cold seeped into my bones. The forest leaned in, patient, aware. I tried to move. Even the slightest step felt loud. Heavy, impossible to disguise. Every rustle of leaves felt deliberate. Every crack of a branch seemed to announce me. I breathed slowly, traced the path beneath my feet. The silence watched. Nothing moved. Nothing spoke. And yet the weight of the quiet screamed through me. The forest itself waited. For what? I could not say. But every fiber of me knew it was patient, implacable. I stood still, let the silence wash over me. Thick, heavy, complete. Dawn broke. Or at least, I thought it did. The fog remained. Thick, suffocating. Shapes lingered at the edge of my vision. Indistinct. Watching. Patient. The forest hadn't let me go. Every tree repeated itself endlessly. Branches leaned close, brushing the fog with cold fingers. I moved forward. Footsteps swallowed instantly by mist. Every breath heavy. Every heartbeat loud. The lanterns, the shadows, the faces I glimpsed, they were still there, just beyond sight, waiting. I realized some places never release you. The fog is patient, persistent, knowing. I stepped carefully, past twisted roots and crawling mist, through trees that seemed to fold back upon themselves endlessly. The forest exhaled around me, cold, silent, expectant. I breathed. The shapes shifted faintly, but the fog remained, thick, unyielding. And I understood. Some forests, some cabins, some nights, they keep you, even when you think you have left, even when the sun rises. The fog never lifts.